The formal countdown to the next general election has begun with last Wednesday's announcement on the formation of the committee that reviews Singapore's electoral boundaries. In the past 3 GEs under Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, the period between the announcement of the electoral boundaries review committees or EBRC's formation and polling day has ranged between 2 and 6 months. The committee will set out the battleground for the next general election, which has to be held by April 2021. Which are the areas which are ripe for change, and how will it affect your constituency? With us to discuss this is political correspondent Rachel Au-Yong. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Dylan.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks for being here. Now, I must first mention that you are not the EBRC and that we are merely exploring the possibilities of the new electoral boundaries. Just in case, anybody gets confused out there.
Yes. So we're not the government. We're here to report what our contacts, so cadres, MPs, volunteers, residents are seeing on the ground. So just to recap, maybe not all the audience members here are familiar, but the EBRC committee that was convened was only announced last week. So PM repeated his terms of reference, and he gave this in 2016. He repeated it again in the report, and essentially at the next G we should see GRCs with smaller GRCs, so perhaps we won't see any more 6-man GRCs, and we should definitely see more than the 13 SMCs, single seat wards that we currently have. With that in mind, there's always guidelines to see how big each MP should be looking after, how many people each MP should be looking after. So the range, as we calculated it, should be somewhere between 20,000 to 38,000. That is a huge range. But we still have wards exceeding this. So one of the major wards I think are definitely ripe for change is the whole northeast of Singapore. Pasir Ris Punggol, Sengkang West. These 2 wards, one's a GRC, one's a single seat, they have just, grown exponentially. So Pasir Ris Punggol, I think they have more than 55,000 people since voters alone since the last election. Sengkang West is 47,000 when your upper limit is 38k. So that is huge. We're definitely expecting some change here. So if a ward is too unwieldy, your MP can't really take care of you properly, right? Because honestly, time is finite. Exactly. Yeah. So I think we should see some changes there. Another point we should note is this idea of natural boundaries. I think as we progress towards, I do think Singapore government is fair to a large extent, but whether the population thinks it is fair, it must also be seen to be fair. So this idea of natural boundaries, no gerrymandering, that's also pretty important, right? So one of the interviewees that we had was Mr. Charles Chong of Punggol East, and he was talking about how Pasir Ris Punggol at some point had a Punggol South, Punggol Central. They have since been renamed Sengkang South, Sengkang Central, which is kind of funny, right? Because to us nowadays, Punggol and Sengkang are very distinct,
very different
towns. They are next to each other, but Sengkang is Sengkang, Punggol is Punggol. So I think we should have this idea of natural boundaries coming out. It would be good, and I think that's another way we might see that part of Northeast change. So you could very well have a Sengkang GRC, and that's not inconceivable because we actually have some MPs from Sengkang actually do have a panel already looking at municipal issues there. You could have a Pasir Ris GRC, you could even have a Punggol GRC, because that whole place is so large that you could have 3 new GRCs there. So that's one option. Yeah,
I see. So let's just do this kind of like step by step.
Sure.
So let's move on to Potong Pasir, which is another area that many say may change. SMC's Potong Pasir is the only ward among the 29 constituencies that has fallen below the minimum voter benchmark. So more on this, please. Could the SMC be wiped off the electoral map?
So that's the thing, right? If you go by pure numbers, there is definitely a case to be made. But it has never changed for the last 30 years, despite that the numbers didn't fall overnight. So the numbers have been dwindling, but it has never, ever been redrawn. I think that's largely had to do with the fact that it was, until recently, an opposition ward held by Mr. Cham Si Tong. Could we see changes this time? If it were GRC, I would say the likelihood is a lot higher. However, because it is a single seat ward, and PM has already said he wants more SMCs, is there really an incentive? Also, Bidadari is in the area. We should expect a couple of households moving into. So I am
new households, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm not particularly convinced that it has to be absorbed. Also because the numbers that have dropped is nowhere near as stark as the Pasir Ris Punggol. Yeah, so my guess is no, but again, EBRC has the final call.
Of course. Also, like East Coast, of course, it's another another place that people are talking about. There's been some speculation, of course, that East Coast could see some changes, just like how Moulmein Kallang GRC did in 2015.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, East Coast did fairly well last round. I mean, it wasn't the best showing, but it had 60% compared to the PAP's national average of 69%. Is there a political incentive to redraw? There always is, right? And it already was withdrawn in the sense that Feng Shan was taken out. So I'm not sure how well people would take it if it were to be redrawn, because at one point in time, East Coast had 6 MPs, it now has 4 MPs. So if you redraw it too many times, which is what we wrote about in our story, people will also say it's unfair. But you do have Mr. Lim Swee Say very likely to retire. At the very least, he's no longer a minister, and typically we do have anchor ministers moving in. So there are a number of GRCs with 2 ministers right now. I think if anything happens to East Coast, it'll be a result of, say, changes to that whole Pasir Ris Punggol mess, and if they need to take in anything else, it could be tweaks to the surrounding areas. That's my guess.
So Rachel, we've been talking a lot about the East of Singapore. Let's not forget about the West. So do you think, is the West what's going to happen for the West, the Western front on Singapore? What's going to be some changes, do you think? So
the West has always been a PAP stronghold. I said 60% was not bad for East Coast, but if you go over to the West, if you look at 7 out of 10 wards, I think they scored more than 70% of the votes. 70% voted for the PAP there. Those are amazing numbers for the PAP. I think similarly, any changes to the West would probably be a result of other changes, right? Because if we start from the North, if you start with Pasir Ris Punggol and you redraw, you have a Sengkang, then maybe Marsiling UT next to it may be affected. Nee Soon may be affected. And then, there's knock-on effects. The one possible dicey ward could be West Coast GRC, because now we have Dr. Tan Shin Bok, who was a former PAP MP, did very well in Ayer Rajah, which is in West Coast GRC. He could be coming down there, and they might want to redraw in anticipation of that, because I know that there are also numbers and all that. So I still believe that anything that happens to the West will be a result of other changes. For the ones that for those changes you need exact because of population, housing demographics, so on and so forth. But could the West Coast be affected? Hey, it's next to Tanjong Pagar. Tanjong Pagar has 2 ministers.
Because anything can
really happen. Anything goes. We are reading tea leaves, but that's part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah. All right, thanks so much for sharing with us, Rachel. Of course, if you'd like to read more about the Singapore general election and keep abreast with all the updates, you can always head down to our website. It's www.straitstimes.com. Now, those were the top stories of the day. For more news and videos, you can always head down once again to our website. And I'm Dylan. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.